Here's what happens if you follow strict minimalist money rules for 10 years straight. You go from a 25-year-old with $6,200 in savings and $25,800 in debt to a 35-year-old sitting on more than $400,000 in invested assets, without a high salary, without a windfall, and without a single thing in your life that photographs well. The math is almost insultingly simple. Save 70 cents of every dollar. Put it in low-cost index funds, refuse to upgrade your lifestyle when your paycheck grows, and never finance a depreciating thing you can't pay for in cash. Do that for a decade, and the compounding does something that feels illegal. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what it costs you, and it isn't money. So let me show you year by year exactly what those 10 years look like from the inside. Because the brochure version and the lived version are two completely different stories. The coffee goes cold before you finish it. That's the detail you'll remember years later, not the spreadsheet glowing on your laptop, not the number you circled 3 times in red ink. Just the cold coffee, the microwave clock reading 11:47 at night, and the specific silence of an apartment where the only sound is the refrigerator humming and your own breathing. You're 25. You make $54,000 a year, which lands right around the U.S. median for someone your age, and which feels, depending on the hour, like either way, too much or nowhere close to enough. You've got $6,200 in savings, $23,000 left on your student loans, and a credit card you've been rotating a balance on since you were 22. That balance is $2,800. You've been meaning to pay it off for so long that meaning to stopped being an intention and quietly became a personality trait. Tonight you do something that when you try to explain it to anyone later will sound completely unremarkable. You decide to stop. Not quit your job. Not move to a cabin. Not sell everything and go live off the land. You decide to stop letting money pour through your hands without a direction. From this point forward, 70 cents of every dollar you earn either kills debt or goes into a low-cost index fund. The remaining 30 cents runs your entire life, rent, food, gas, everything. The rules don't come from a guru or a bestseller. They come from a calculator and a quiet desperation you're finally willing to look at head on. You run the numbers twice, then a third time because you don't trust yourself to have done it right. At your current savings rate, roughly 8%, which brutally is already more than double the national average, you'd be 58 before you had real options. At 70%, you'd have options at 35. And the distance between 58 and 35 isn't 23 years. It's a different life entirely. You close the laptop. The decision gets made in the same room where you ate cereal that morning, in the same apartment where nothing visible has changed. No witness, no applause. Nobody on earth knows it happened. That's the thing nobody tells you about the decisions that actually reroute your life. They almost never feel like anything in the moment. You pour the cold coffee down the sink, and something quiet and irreversible begins. In short, commit 70% of every dollar to debt, and index funds live on the other 30%. At a normal savings rate, you'd have real options near 58. At 70% near 35. 3 months in, your buddy Marcus buys a new place. Not new to him, new period. One of those glass and exposed concrete towers that went up downtown with a gym that overlooks the skyline. You show up to his housewarming on a Saturday in March, stand in his living room eating imported cheese off a wooden board, and feel something you weren't braced for. You feel completely, profoundly invisible. Not because anyone's unkind. Marcus is generous, the people are easy, the apartment is genuinely beautiful in that effortless way expensive things are beautiful. But nobody here is asking about your index fund. Nobody is admiring your brokerage balance with the same energy they're using to admire the kitchen island. You've been on the rules for 11 weeks. You've knocked $1,900 off the credit card. You've cut your subscriptions from 7 down to 2. You drive a 2017 Honda Fit. You paid $8,400 cash, for which erased your old $310 a month car payment, gets 36 miles to the gallon, and which not one single person has ever asked you about. You rerouted your paycheck so that $3,150 leaves your account automatically the day it lands $1,200 into a Roth IRA and a taxable brokerage account $800 onto the debt. The rest runs your life. You are building something real. You know it the way you know a fact in your head correctly without being able to feel it yet. At the party, someone you just met asks what you drive. You tell them. There's a pause about 1 second longer than it needs to be. They nod and steer the conversation somewhere else. This is the silence. Not one crushing moment, but 1,000 tiny gaps where the status performance used to go. Conversations that used to open now close. The friend who stops asking if you want to split a vacation rental because they already know your answer. The coworker who stops inviting you to the Thursday happy hours that run $45 with tip. Here's what nobody tells you about voluntary simplicity. The social cost is real and it's front-loaded. You pay it first before the math has had any time to prove you right. You pay it in invisibility and in the very specific loneliness of making a choice that nobody around you is making, with no results yet to point at. It's month 3. Your brokerage account holds $4,100. It is not impressive. It does not feel like freedom. It feels like a number in a box nobody can see. But somewhere across the city, in a building with better lighting, in a room full of people eating good cheese, something is happening that nobody at that party can see either. The gap is opening. In short, the cost of aggressive saving is social, and it lands first. Dropped trips, happy hours, status talk. You pay that bill before the math ever proves you right. The debt is gone. All of it. Credit card cleared, student loan paid off 11 months ahead of schedule. And the feeling when you make that final payment isn't triumph. It's the quiet, unremarkable sensation of something simply ending, a low background hum you'd stopped noticing suddenly switched off. You redirect the old debt payments straight into investments. No ceremony, no lifestyle upgrade. The money that used to leave still leaves. It just leaves differently now. This is the rule you were most afraid of. No lifestyle inflation after a raise. You got one in month 14, $4,200 a year, which should feel like permission to finally exhale. Instead, you bump your automatic investment transfer by $350 a month and spend the rest of the raise on nothing in particular. And you understand something now that you couldn't have. At 25, this is the rule that separates the people who talk about building wealth from the people who actually do it. Your savings rate matters more than your income. Vanguard's How America Saves 2025 report found that the average total 401k contribution rate hit a record 12% of pay in 2024. And Vanguard itself recommends saving 12% to 15% to land good retirement outcomes. You're running more than 4 times that. The math works if you let it work. Most people never let it work. By month 26, you've got $19,400 invested. This is the part of the story where nobody claps. Because $19,400 is not a number anybody brags about at a dinner party. It doesn't photograph. It doesn't throw a housewarming. It's just a figure in a brokerage account that at the S&P 500's long-run average of roughly 10% a year is doing something patient and invisible while you go about your life. You've got a friend named Devin. He's 26, works in logistics, makes $49,000, and just financed a $52,000 truck, $980 a month, plus another $290 for insurance. Devin's funny and warm and genuinely great at his job. One of the first people you'd call if something went wrong. He also has, as far as you can tell, roughly $0 invested anywhere. The truck is spotless. He's proud of it. And you understand exactly what that truck means to him without an ounce of judgment because you were chasing the same thing at 25 before the rules. The gap between your two paths isn't visible yet. You're both just 26 living lives that look basically identical from the outside, same income bracket, same city, same orbit. But underneath the surface, something has already diverged so completely that 5 years from now, you'll barely see each other across the distance. The gap is the thing nobody in personal finance actually talks about. Not the sacrifice, not the discipline, the gap. That invisible, ever-widening chasm between the person who invests early and the person who fully intends to start next year. Because here's what compound interest actually is stripped of the inspirational poster framing. It's time. That's the whole mechanism. Every dollar you invest at 26 is worth dramatically more than the same dollar invested at 36. Not because of magic, but because the earlier dollar gets 10 extra years to do its one and only job. You buy the Honda, a fresh set of tires, $480. You don't feel a flicker of guilt. The one-in, one-out rule has pared your apartment down to the point where you genuinely love being in it. Clutter, it turns out, carries a psychological weight the minimalism books describe in breathless language, but that you only really get once you feel it leave your own body. You feel lighter, still invisible, still quiet, still building in the dark. In one more year, the numbers are going to show you something undeniable, and you are not ready for how that's going to feel. In short, what you keep compounds, what you earn doesn't. The average 401k saver put away a record 12% of pay in 2024, saving 50 to 70%, just runs the same math on fast forward. Year 3, something cracks. Not the plan. The plan is working exactly as designed. The thing that cracks is harder to name. It lives in the chest below language. Then on a Tuesday in October, it stops being abstract. Your company announces a restructuring. 2 people on your floor, including the guy in the cubicle next to yours who has a kid and a mortgage, are walked out by lunch. You keep your job. But you watch in real time what happens to people living paycheck to paycheck when the paycheck stops. One of them, you find out later, had about 3 weeks of cash to his name. That night you go home and add it up. If they let you go tomorrow, you have enough invested and saved to cover your bare bones life for over a year without earning a dime, a year of runway. The cubicle guy had 3 weeks. And here's the strange part: instead of relief, what you feel first is guilt, then loneliness. Because you also skipped your cousin's Vegas trip last month. Not because you couldn't afford a version of it you could have, but the version you could afford ran completely against the energy of the group, which was loud and expensive and running on credit cards nobody was thinking too hard about. So you stayed home. Your cousin sent a group photo from the strip at 2 a.m. Everyone in it looked like the best possible version of themselves. You put the phone face down and sit with the question you've been avoiding. Is this the point? Is this where you become a guy living in a monastery of his own design, watching everyone else actually live while he quietly accumulates? The social cost has been steady and cumulative. The restaurant that's out of range. The conversation where you've got no car, no vacation, no renovation to throw in. Cornell researchers reported in 2024 that financial stress touches around 70% of Americans, even people who are objectively fine. Yours is the photo negative of all, that it's the absence of financial stress and the choices it took to get there that's quietly isolating you. You call your mom on Sunday. She asks if you're doing okay. You say yes. She knows you well enough not to fully believe it. Because here's what nobody warns you about chasing financial independence in your late 20s. It's a fundamentally countercultural act. The whole machinery of modern life is engineered with enormous money behind it to make the performance of consumption feel not just desirable, but morally correct, like what grown-ups do, like what people who've got it together do. Opting out doesn't feel neutral. It feels like dissent. And dissent is hard to sit with at 27 on a Friday night while your phone lights up with people who are somewhere loud and expensive and alive. But the layoff lodged something in you the loneliness can't quite argue with. You question the rules all month. You don't break a single one. And then something happens that yanks you all the way back. You check your brokerage account. In short, the loneliness comes first. The payoff comes later. The day a layoff turns a year of runway into the difference between calm and panic. $47,300. You have to look at it twice. You've been contributing steadily for 33 months. The market hit a rough patch around months 14 through 18. Your balance actually dropped for a few weeks, and you felt something turn over in your stomach that you did not let yourself act on, which turns out to have been the single most important financial decision of your entire life. Doing nothing, just staying in, and then it recovered and kept going. $47,300, contributions and returns combined, on an income that never once cracked $62,000, with a savings rate that started at 70% and is held right around there. Through 3 years of small raises, you flatly refuse to inflate your lifestyle around. You sit with that number for a long time. This is the turning point. But it doesn't land like a movie moment. No swell of music. Nobody calls to congratulate you. You're just sitting on a couch in an apartment that costs $1,240 a month, exactly 24% of your take-home pay, barely inside your own rule, in a city where the average one-bedroom now runs close to $1,900. And you're looking at $47,300 that is working while you sleep. Devin bought new rims for the truck last month. $1,800 on a credit card. He showed you a photo, and honestly, they look great. You told him so, and you meant it. You also happen to know because the math is just always there now. Like a second language you picked up late and can't stop thinking. In that $1,800 invested at your age, at historical average returns, is worth roughly $12,400 by the time you're 45. That's the thing you can't unsee. Not because you're auditing Devin's choices, you're not. The arithmetic just runs in the background all the time on everything. Here's the inflection point the financial independence crowd talks about but never quite explains. There's a moment somewhere in year 3 or 4 where the balance stops feeling like a number and starts feeling like time, like actual tangible convertible units of future freedom. At $47,300, throwing off roughly 10% in an average year, your money is generating about $4,700 annually all by itself, without your job, without you doing anything except leaving it alone. That's around $391 a month conjured out of money and nothing else. That number is small. That number is also the front edge of something that does not stop. It doubles, then doubles again, and by year 10, it'll be producing more every month than your rent costs. And you feel it for the first time, not the intellectual certainty of the math, but the felt sense of it. The weight of accumulated patience landing in your body. The doubt from October doesn't vanish, but it shifts. It becomes a smaller voice running underneath a larger, calmer, far more confident one. You bump your monthly transfer up by another $200. You do it automatically before you can talk yourself out of it. The next week you take Devin to lunch, split a reasonable bill, and laugh harder than you have in months. The road is still long, but for the first time you can see the direction. And there is no going back through it. In short, it gets real around year 3. At $47,000 invested, a 10% year throws off about $391 a month on its own small, but it never stops doubling. You're 33, it's a Tuesday, 10 in the morning, and you're sitting in a coffee shop with nowhere you're required to be until 1 p.m. This is not a vacation. It is not a sick day. It is just a Tuesday. This is what enough looks like from the inside. and it looks like a coffee you actually get to finish while it's still hot. The brokerage account sits at $214,000. Your Roth IRA holds another $68,000. Combined $282,000 invested. For context, the Federal Reserve's 2023 survey of consumer finances put the median net worth of Americans aged 35 to 44 at roughly $135,000, and that figure includes home equity. You're 33 and you've already cleared that median in liquid investable assets alone with no house attached. This wasn't exactly the plan. The plan was the number, the enough figure you first defined at 25 and have refined a little every year since. Your number was never retire at 33. Your number is $400,000 invested, the point at which the 4% rule, the withdrawal rate research suggests, has historically sustained 30-year retirements with overwhelming probability throws off about $16,000 a year. Pair that with a modest part-time income doing work you'd actually choose, and your core survival simply stops depending on your willingness to trade hours for whatever rate somebody else decides they're worth. Options. That was always the word underneath all of it. Not stuff, not status. Options. You're not at the number yet, but you can feel the edge of it now. You can feel the shape of the life waiting on the other side. The Honda Fit has 91,000 miles on it. You've maintained it meticulously because a reliable, fully paid-off car is, financially speaking, one of the most powerful decisions a person can make in their adult life. The average new car payment in the U.S. hit $767 a month in the fourth quarter of 2025, according to Experian. You haven't had a car payment in 8 years. Run that single decision forward at historical market returns over 8 years, and you're looking at roughly $124,000. One choice compounded. Your apartment runs $1,450 a month. Now rents went up, but you've kept your housing under 25% of take-home, which took one move 2 years ago and one stretch with a roommate you don't regret for a second. You still do one in, one out, except it isn't discipline anymore. It's just preference. There's a different relationship with your stuff when every single object in your home is there because you chose it, not because it accumulated, not because entropy dragged it in. Devin bought a house last year. Finally, he's 32. The mortgage is steep and the down payment took just about everything he'd managed to put away, which wasn't much. But the house is real and it's his, and he's genuinely proud. And you went to the housewarming, ate food. He grilled, stood in his backyard, and felt something uncomplicated for the first time in a long while. Pride. Just pride. For both of you. The comparison that used to cut has gone quiet because you've started to understand what arrival actually is, and it isn't a destination you reach and plant a flag on. It's a threshold you cross where the future for the first time costs less than the present did, where you stop buying time because time has started arriving on its own. You order a second coffee, you sit in the Tuesday morning light coming through the window, and you think about your 25-year-old self running numbers at 11:47 at night with cold coffee and something close to panic in his chest. You want to tell him something, but you know the thing you want to tell him can't be told. It can only be lived. In short, by 33, about $282,000 invested, past the $135,000 median net worth for ages 35 to 44 in the Fed's 2023 survey, with no house and a sub-$62,000 income. You're 35, you're sitting in an ordinary room in an ordinary chair, and you've crossed the number $403,000. The enough you defined at 25 adjusted twice for inflation passed last month. You stared at it the same way you stared at that very first spreadsheet, same quality of silence. Except the silence means something completely different now. Here's what you thought you were doing when you started. You thought you were solving a money problem. You thought the rules were about math. The 70% savings rate, the no car payment, the index funds, the housing ceiling, the zero subscription creep. You thought these were financial instruments you were wielding with discipline. What you were actually doing was practicing a philosophy whose full implications you couldn't see from the starting line. Financial minimalism is not about having less. Everyone says that, and almost nobody means it the deep way it needs to be meant. It's about the relentless, honest, daily reckoning with one question: what is this for? Every purchase, every expense, every lifestyle decision, what is this actually for, and is it delivering what I think I'm buying? The car you drove for 9 years was for transportation. It delivered transportation with zero waste. The subscriptions you cut were for entertainment. Entertainment that turned out to be marginal and easily replaced. They didn't survive the question. And the lifestyle inflation you refused after every raise and every promotion, the salary that's now $89,000 and has not produced a single corresponding upgrade in your visible life, that money went somewhere real. It went somewhere that compounds. It went somewhere that now generates $16,000 a year without you lifting a finger. And here's what nobody tells you about financial minimalism. After a decade, the money is not the thing you're most grateful for. The thing you're most grateful for is the clarity. 10 years of asking, what is this for, has bled into every corner of your life that has nothing to do with dollars. Your relationships are cleaner. Your time is more deliberately arranged. You carry far fewer obligations to maintain appearances you never believed in. You waste less of everything. By every external measure, you're unremarkable. The apartment's nice, the car's old, the wardrobe is considered. The vacations, when you take them, are chosen for the experience and not the post. And by every internal measure that matters to you and only to you, you are precisely where you chose to be. Devin got promoted. He's doing well. His house is appreciated. He still has the truck. You had dinner last month at a restaurant he picked, and he insisted on covering it, and you let him because it mattered to him and because some things matter more than the math. He said something over that dinner that's stayed with you. He said, I feel like I'm always catching up to something. I don't even know what. You knew what? You didn't say it. It wasn't the moment. What Devin is chasing is exactly what you were chasing at 25, the feeling, the sense of having arrived, the permission to finally exhale. But the feeling can't be bought. That's the truth running underneath every level of this story. Not that spending is wrong. Not that wanting beautiful things is a character flaw. Not that Devin's truck was a mistake and your Honda Fit was enlightenment. The truth is simpler and harder than any of that. The feeling of having arrived cannot be purchased because it was never located in anything you could acquire. It lives in the relationship you have with your own future, in whether you trust that you're building something real even when nobody can see it, even when the party is somewhere else, even when the photos roll in at 2 a.m. from somewhere loud and expensive and alive. When you trust that the need to perform arrival dissolves. Not entirely you're human, and the hunger for recognition never fully disappears, but it quiets. It becomes one voice among many instead of the only one you can hear. At 35, you don't have a house. You don't have the truck. You don't have the granite countertop, or the kitchen island, or the renovated bathroom. None of the things your peer group uses to signal that they've figured it out. What you have is a brokerage account past the number. A Tuesday morning that belongs entirely to you. A life whose shape you recognize because you drew it yourself. At 25, on a night when nobody was watching, with a calculator and cold coffee and one quiet, fierce decision to find out what was real, the rules were never the point. The rules were just a structure for holding a question. And the question, the one the rules kept dragging you back to week after week, year after year, every single time money moved, was never, can I afford this? It was never, do I deserve this? It was, who am I becoming with this? And it turns out that question, asked honestly and without flinching for 10 years straight, will do more for your life than any single financial decision you could ever make. The coffee is hot. You finish it before it gets cold. In short, the real payoff isn't the $403,000, it's the clarity. 10 years in the question stops being, can I afford this? And becomes, who am I becoming with this?